Hello and welcome to Ask a Sex Therapist, a space where we explore sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and sexual well-being with curiosity, compassion, and evidence-based understanding. I'm Justine Gilliland, a sex therapist and counselor, and in today's episode, we're exploring the question, why does sexual pleasure matter for sexual health and well-being? When people think about sexual health, they often think only about the physical side of sexuality, things like erections, pain, hormones, reproduction, or sexually transmitted infections. But sexuality is so much bigger than that. Sexual pleasure is central to sexual well-being and sexual functioning. It is not an extra part of sexuality, but a core component of how individuals experience connection, satisfaction, meaning, and enjoyment in their sexual lives. Sexual pleasure can be understood as both the physical and psychological enjoyment and satisfaction derived from solo or shared sexual activity. It can also be experienced through thoughts, imaginations, and dreams, highlighting that sexuality is not just physical, but deeply connected to the mind. Sexual pleasure is closely linked to both sexual function, how the body responds sexually, and sexual well-being, meaning how we feel about our sexuality and ourselves. To understand this more fully, it can be helpful to look at sexuality through a broader lens. When it comes to sexuality, there are four pillars, and this means looking at sexuality through a comprehensive approach. These four pillars are inherently interconnected: sexual health, sexual pleasure, sexual well-being, and sexual justice. These pillars do not exist in isolation. They continuously influence one another and together shape a person's overall experience of sexuality. Sexual health includes the biological and medical foundations of sexuality: desire, arousal, and bodily function. It also includes reproductive health, STI prevention, and importantly, freedom from sexual violence. Sexual well-being focuses on the psychological and emotional experience of sexuality. This includes self-esteem, comfort with one's sexuality, resilience, and the ability to feel present and engaged in sexual experiences. Sexual pleasure is the lived experiential aspect of sexuality, how satisfying, enjoyable, and meaningful sexual experiences feel. It is influenced by the body, the mind, relationships, and the broader environment. And sexual justice refers to the social and structural context of sexuality. This includes safety, autonomy, and freedom from discrimination or violence. Without this foundation, true sexual well-being is not possible. Together, these pillars reflect the biopsychosocial nature of sexuality, where biology, psychology, relationships, and social context all interact. So, how does sexual pleasure influence sexual function? Sexual pleasure is a key mechanism underlying desire, arousal, and orgasm. Desire is often driven by the anticipation of pleasure or the response to pleasure. If sexual experiences are pleasurable, desire is more likely to emerge. When pleasure is absent, desire often decreases. Similarly, arousal supports pleasure. If arousal is inhibited, whether biologically or psychologically, pleasure is reduced, which can then impact desire and orgasm. Sexual pleasure also plays a role in maintaining physical sexual function. Experiencing pleasure requires a level of connection with one's body. When individuals feel disconnected due to shame, fear, or negative messaging, this can interfere with arousal and bodily responses. Conversely, pleasure-driven sexual activity can support blood flow and tissue health, maintain erectile and vaginal function, improve sleep, relaxation, and pain management, and support overall physical well-being. Regular engagement with pleasurable sexual experiences can help preserve sexual function over time. This is why, for me as a sex therapist, what is more important than understanding how frequently you engage in sexual intimacy, the question that is more important to me is how pleasurable are your sexual experiences? Sexual pleasure also influences safer sex. It is one of the strongest motivators for sexual behavior. When sexual health is approached purely from a risk or disease prevention lens, it can disconnect from how people actually engage in sex. People are often motivated by connection, closeness, and pleasure, not just health outcomes. When pleasure is included in conversations about safe sex, condom use increases, individuals are more likely to engage in protective behaviors, and sexual experiences feel more satisfying and sustainable. At the same time, pleasure is complex. Pleasure does not always equate to safety or well-being. Pleasure can sometimes occur in contexts that are not safe, consensual, or aligned with a person's values. This highlights that pleasure alone is not enough and must be considered alongside consent, safety, and well-being. Approaching sexuality through fear or shame is ineffective. Understanding the role of pleasure allows for more meaningful, realistic, and supportive conversations about sexual health. So, how does sexual pleasure influence sexual well-being? Sexual pleasure is foundational to sexual well-being. It supports self-esteem and body confidence, emotional connection and relationship satisfaction, communication about needs, boundaries, and preferences, autonomy, and self-determination. When pleasure is prioritized, individuals are more likely to understand their own needs and desires, communicate openly with partners, and experience sex as something mutual and meaningful. Sexual pleasure also broadens the definition of sexuality beyond intercourse, allowing for more flexible, diverse, and satisfying experiences. Importantly, sexual pleasure is closely linked to autonomy and consent. Pleasure is most meaningful when it is freely chosen, safe, and aligned with personal values. My final thoughts are this. Sexual pleasure is not separate from sexual health, it is central to it. A comprehensive approach to sexuality recognizes that pleasure, function, well-being, and safety are all interconnected. When pleasure is understood and integrated into this broader picture, sexuality becomes less about performance or dysfunction and more about connection, meaning, and lived experience. If your experience of sexuality feels confusing, pressured, or disconnected, it does not mean something is wrong. It may simply be an invitation to understand your body, your needs, and your relationships more deeply. With the right support, sexual well-being can become something that is not only functional, but also meaningful, enjoyable, and sustainable. Thank you for listening to Ask a Sex Therapist. This podcast is a space where I'll be exploring common questions and themes that arise in my work around sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and sexual well-being. Topics that many people quietly struggle with, but rarely talk about openly. If you'd like to learn more explore related blogs, or inquire about online sex therapy across Australia, you can visit my website at wellbeingcounsellor.com.au. You can also subscribe for future conversations about sexuality, intimacy, relationships, and emotional well-being.